Really and truly, you see, the only thing we can let go of are our limits. But of course we think our limits are our are our knowledge, our education, all this vaunted vanity of of human existence, you see. Yes, we love it. We're totally conditioned to think this way. Yes, it's big stuff. I take great comfort, especially now autumn's drawing on, and every morning I go early up into the morning. I walk up the hill in Bakewell to the church to meditate, and of course, if you're lucky living in the country, perhaps the starlight is not obscured by lights, but I live in a little town where it is, but I go up there and look up at the night sky, just melt into that greatness of the sky, especially if stars are shining. I find that a great comfort and reassurance, really, of the direction. Men always loved the desert then, or spiritual seekers, self-abandonment. There's another medieval mystical book, isn't it? Self-abandonment to divine love. There's all these things sort of like bits in the jigsaw, they begin to have meaning. But I assure you, my dear, in all my years of meditation, I've never met anything, not once, bad or frightening or destructive. It's nothing but pure goodness. And ever, God is nothing but pure benevolence, infinite love. But it can be very frightening to fall into the hands of God. Big stuff. Cosmic. Much bigger than me. What is man that thou art mindful of him? Man's like the grass, grows and withereth away. Big stuff. Just come back to this presence, you see. Someone asked me the other day, what is meant by the mercy of God? Well, just experience it for yourself, you see. Just be informed by what is present. Let that, like air coming into a balloon, let it come into you and inform you. Because this is the true teaching. That doesn't come through man. It's natural. This information. Now just feel how it's infinitely healing, isn't it? It's like the gentlest of balms. Soothes away all your agitation, your problems, your questions, all the tensions and stresses of life. First of all in ourselves, and then in the whole world. The infinite comfort. Come unto me, says Jesus, all ye who labour and are heavy laden, and I will refresh you. The peace, the infinite love we're all yearning for. In fact, the life that never fails. And all that really need to do is just this. Because it's free. It's a gift. We just need to come out of our little prisons, you see. Just let go. And what do we lose in the process? The only thing we can lose are our limitations, are our chains. This. We lose this to receive this. I listened to there was an interesting video I saw the other day on YouTube. There was some American general or admiral or something talking about the recruits at a high-powered military school where he was an instructor, and talking about the value of making the men make their beds every morning. And of course, they had to make their beds properly, with the blankets properly, just like I was taught as in the army. Neat and tidiness, folding your clothes, cleaning your boots, and everything in order. Your comb and razor and everything in place. He put that right at the top of the requirements to be a good soldier. Yeah. It's a funny fashion these days of living sort of casual and untidiness and throwing things all over the place. But it's in my experience, it's a questionable habit. Very occasionally, Dad would haul us all off to Sunday church, but with an unwilling family, I don't think he was that keen. He'd rather get back to his painting, so it didn't last for long. Mum never cared for church people. But when I look back, particularly on, actually both their lives, particularly my mother's life, which was marked by almost total unselfishness. I don't know anyone that's lived closer to the heart of God than she, really. It's always very interesting, the ones that Jesus chose as his disciples. They weren't the top dogs, were they? They were the bottom ones, and it's often from the most unlikely people that turn out to be Well, who are we to say who's closest to God? It's not for us to judge, is it? But from what we can see of other people's lives, the real heroes, the really best people you come across are often the least noticed, the least sung, aren't they? Now in this great stillness, this presence, it's only one, isn't it? One for all of us. It's like an ocean of presence that contains us all in its arms, isn't it? Within its everlasting arms. This infinite comfort, this infinite loving, the love of God. It contains not only this room full of people, but where does it end? It contains the whole, everything, doesn't it? The whole world. Not only people, but every little worm, every little insect. All things great and small. Now in this infinite mercy, it may seem a bit unnecessary to say, God bless Mummy and Daddy, doesn't it? Or God bless, whoever we want to bless. But of course, this normal human experience is not like this. Normal human experience is very much like this, isn't it? In other words, absent from God. And here we may well reach out comforting words that we picked up from the Bible and say, God help coronavirus or something, or God help the Afghans, refugees. You turn back to this and you realize that, in a way, this rather supersedes that, doesn't it? In this, you realize that this infinite goodness is all pervasive anyway. I don't have to do anything about it except turn from ignorance, turn from darkness to light. Now the structures of what are traditionally taught as prayers, I was taught as a little child before I knew anything about what I'm talking about now. Of course, we're taught to say our prayers, which apparently is a good preparation. We sort of begin the process of turning back. So there we have prayer. All these beautifully worded prayers. O God, that art the author of life and lover of concord, in knowledge of whom standeth our eternal life, whose service is perfect freedom. Marvellous words. But just words, aren't they? We're still functioning from the mind. Now then, if we're fortunate enough to come into meditation and begin to realize what's here, right, present now, then these very same words become self-evident, don't they? Now just listen to them again if I say them while you are present. And won't you find an echo of truth? O God, who art the author of life and lover of concord, in knowledge of whom standeth our eternal life, whose service is perfect freedom. You know the old saying, practice what you preach. And so we gradually come to put into practice what as children we learn at school. And so prayer, like everything else in life, is a development. We grow in prayer. Prayer develops. At some stage in the process, for some people, they remain at that level the whole of their lives. They never grow beyond it, really. But others that come into this greater work may find the one merges into the other. Whether you call it by another word, or you just the word prayer just expands. What does it matter? What are words anyway? You don't have to call it anything, do you? What happens to words when we merge into this infinite stillness? Words are things, creatures of this world, aren't they? And you'll move up into a level where there are no words, where the language is silence. The only language is what you can call the language of the heart. Words are left behind. See, when I look at you, I can see your faces. Some of your minds are still thinking, but some of you are not. Some of you are just looking. You see? Well, there is the level of communication of thought to thought, of words to words. And there's the level of communication which is just eye to eye, heart to heart. And with practice, you don't even need to be in the same room. How can Jesus say, "I'm with you always"? So what are we talking about? What do we mean by Jesus in this context? I am with you always. It's here, isn't it? The Bible's dead clear about this. We live under the, how does he put it? We live in under the domain of the Prince of Darkness. You see, we live. This is humanity. This is where we live, in the world where the blind lead the blind. Absolutely. And so this greatest of adventures, this culmination of life, which is this transition from preparatory to high school, or out of mortality into immortality. And the church, for God's sake, has hardly even mentions it now, is almost forgotten, isn't it? And we live in fear of death, doing our utmost to procrastinate death for another few years to die of something else. Yes, exactly. Well, this is the world, the nature of the world, which is the realm of darkness. Indeed, this is the work, the great work, you see, to overcome darkness. Which may lead me on, if I may, to bring in another one of my favourite themes, which is I wonder if it's appropriate to bring it in at this stage. Well, maybe. Why, I've picked it up, so why not? You may know the traditional image of St. George. Now, the story of St. George is that there was a pretty girl who was being threatened by a dragon, and so he was summoned to help. And how do we face the dragons of this world, the works of darkness, in other words? How do we deal with this? Now, it's interesting that most of these images of St. George, he's depicted as a muscular man with a weapon in his hands to slay the dragon, and blood all over the place, the act of war. But a true icon is quite different to that. And if this is a traditional Russian icon, you may know I've got a strong Russian connection. And in Russia they have a rather different understanding of things. I don't know if you can see it, but here's the dragon down here, you see, the works of dark. And St. George is not, his spear is not really a weapon at all. It's a shaft of consciousness, you see. And he doesn't enter into conflict with the dragon at all. Because what is the dragon? It's like a nightmare, isn't it? It's a work of dark. Is it real? Or is it just a work of dark? Now, if you go into a dark room, what do? You switch on the light. And then what happens to the dark? Vanishes. More light, less dark. Simple as that, isn't it? When you wake up from a bad dream, what happens to it? You may think about it till coffee time. It's gone, isn't it? A great lesson. So here we are, you see, we have this horse of light. So it dances over, isn't it? And here's St. George's face. He's not entering into battle, he's completely serene, at peace. And here's God looking down from the cloud, the shaft of light. So he's in contact with the infinite peace. And he just looks at this and says, oh, it's just dark. Dances over it, you see. And so the darkness, what happens? It just vanishes away, shrinks away. Now, how do monsters grow? How does coronavirus become a monster? The more you think about it, the bigger it gets, doesn't it? The more the media dwells on it, it gets bigger it gets. But we haven't thought about it once this morning, have we? So what's happened to it? So you see, this work is very, very practical. Of course, we're brought up to the realm of weapons of I must sort out the world, take on all these burdens of the world. Well, that's one way of working. That's the way of the world, the way the world works. But those that are called to this work discover another way of working. When, instead of relying on the arm of flesh that fails, you rely on the Almighty that doesn't fail, that faileth not. This is the great comfort. That everything else in life fails sooner or later. And certainly I fail. So ultimately, we find the best thing we can do is to surrender to that which faileth not. Even if sitting here in the room, we apparently overcome the works of darkness, what about the others that apparently don't? Perhaps it's a case of just more light, less dark. Perhaps the more light comes into the world, the less dark there is. Perhaps it's as simple as that, my dear. Do you know, one of the first spiritual books I had, I think before I learned to meditate myself, was called Saints Who Moved the World. And I read about these chaps that sat in a cave in the Himalayas or in the desert somewhere and just meditated or prayed. And their names have gone down through history. And, well, did they change the world? Well, the author of this book obviously thought they did. Do you know, again, someone was asking at breakfast about this work. How did it start? Well, was it this interview with ConsciousTV and Phil coming onto the scene? And without Phil, I'd still be an unknown man. I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. Or was it that 60 years of meditation? Maybe? Was it that? I don't know. 25 years of sitting in Bakewell Church, unknown, just rather scorned by the rest of the people in the church, this useless man, doing nothing. I don't know, though. And why are millions now watching these videos? Do you know, when I started to meditate, I've been very fortunate. I lived through an interesting period. I was a farmer. I was one of the first organic farmers, you know. And when I started, I was called a crank. The well-known word for anybody who thought like that was just cranks. And people laughed at me because I didn't want to be what was then the sort of fashion, the modern sort of farming. And you know, organic farming has become a worldwide fashion, hasn't it? And similarly, meditation was regarded with great suspicion by nearly everybody in the West. The church certainly was dead against it. This Eastern, you know, nonsense, like my dad said, mystical nonsense. And now meditation is, you know, the millions were looking at it. Not only my videos, but it's also hundreds of gurus on the internet, aren't there? Everybody talks about meditation. It's very odd how things change in life. So God knows, dear, I don't. God works in mysterious ways, as you say. And as for your question, Anthony, does meditation help with one's personal problems, depression and anxiety? Well, dear, sometimes maybe. But I went through a terrible period of depression after I'd been meditating 20 odd years or more. Because you see, we're so mixed up and screwed up. We're absolutely bogged down, you see, with what the Bible calls sin, which is this. You know, it's impossible for us to realise how totally taken over we are by sin. If you think that, what can you take with you beyond the grave? Here you are, a strong young man with a good mind, sitting in front of me. Now, in a few years, you're going to be a corpse. Now, what can you take with you out of the grave, beyond the grave? You can't take your strong arms, can you? Or your bright eyes? No. So what's there? Now, everything that dies and is eaten by worms, because that's your destiny, like all of our destinies, is not it. There you are. If you want to know what sin is, it's what dies. The wages of sin is death. Now, can meditation sort that out? Well, maybe like I was saying to Cam, gradually, more light, less dark. But also, the more the light shines, the more it shines on the dark, the more it reveals ever more deeper layers of darkness. So, you may find depression comes back to the end of your life. If you studied the lives of the saints, my dear, it's not just 1, 2, 3, bingo. They have a lifetime struggle. I do still. I still have to go through, bear the burden of each day. I assure you. The kingdom of God is not of this world. We all have to bear our cross through this life. Yes, meditation may bring you some comfort. At least it opens up a window, as it were, of something more. Well, sometimes it does, not always. Sometimes it just remains here and you can't never get further than this. But other times you get a glimpse of something better. But then, you see, as much as acquiring light, we have to realize the mess we're in. You can't let go until you realize it. We let go what we can let go, which is our awareness of what there is at any one time. And then there's more and more and more and more and more. That's why you need courage to keep going.